Welcome to another episode of our video series of the mechanics of human cognition.
It's great to be here. I hope you've had a good week.
I have, thanks. Every time we sit down for this, I'm struck by how much of the brain's machinery just runs in the background. We don't even see it.
It's deeply humbling. And today we're tackling something I think is, well, it's one of the most powerful tools for self-modification we have. Reading.
Right.
Specifically, we're exploring how a single text, just one book, can fundamentally alter a person's entire cognitive framework.
Yeah, we hear it all the time, don't we? That book changed my life. But we want to get past the feeling of it and actually look at the cognitive engineering. What are the precise steps that take external data, a book, and turn it into real, lasting internal change?
Well, the first thing we have to establish for you, our listener, is a core constraint in cognitive science. External catalysts are never enough on their own. Our analysis of these pathways, it shows that a book, or an encounter, or any big event really, it only works when the internal conditions are already right.
So the book is a tool.
Yeah.
But the lock is, already primed to be picked.
That's a great way to put it. We're really examining the reader, not the text, as the true source of the power.
It's so easy to give all the credit to a book, something like The Republic or Meditations, to think it has some kind of magic in it.
But the mechanism is entirely internal. Precisely. The person has to be in a state of, let's call it cognitive dissonance. They're actively searching.
They know something's wrong.
They know something's wrong, but they don't know what it is or how to fix it. Their current operating system just isn't working for them anymore.
We see this in all the great stories, right? I mean, think of The Matrix. Neo was already looking for Morpheus. He was already deep in that search.
Yes.
The opportunity, the red pill, it only showed up, it only meant something, because that internal quest was already happening. The external matches the internal.
It's all about readiness. When the brain is actively seeking answers, it literally increases its receptivity to new information.
But today,
what we see so often is that people choose to numb those feelings. That crucial sense of uncertainty or dissatisfaction, they drown it in distraction.
so if your antenna are down, the perfect book could float right by you.
And it registers as just noise. Information, not transformation. The opportunity just passes. Not because the catalyst was weak, but because the internal engine for change was switched off.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly. So let's talk about the medium itself. Why is reading a text, really engaging with it, why does that still feel so different? So much more powerful than just listening to an audiobook or watching a video.
The key is the unique temporality of it. Reading is self-paced, it's effortful.
Right, it forces you to slow down.
It forces the mind to slow down. Unlike a video where the information just comes at you, with reading you control the speed, the input speed, and more importantly, the integration speed. You stop, you think, you reread a sentence.
So it's not about being inefficient. The slowness is the point.
The slowness is about disruption. I mean, real mental development only happens when you break your habitual thought patterns.
The old cognitive loops.
Exactly. We spend most of our time just recycling the same thoughts, and we mistake that repetition for actual thinking. A complex idea in a book forces your executive function to wake up. It's an energy-intensive disruption, and that is the absolute precursor to forming new neural pathways.
I see. So the brain has to work harder to integrate it, and that effort is what creates the change. And that change then,
Yeah.
it trickles down.
That's the behavioral pathway. A sustained change in your thought structure will inevitably change your emotional responses.
And emotions drive action.
They determine action. And because reading demands so much personal engagement, the shift it creates is just. It's far more durable than the fleeting impact of passive media. The effort itself helps cement the change.
Speaking of effort, what about the quality of that engagement? There's that great quote from a writer who said, "You should expect little from a book if you don't put in the same effort the author did." What does that mean, cognitively?
It means you have to invest. Critically, analytically, and emotionally. I mean, if an author spent 5 years distilling some profound truth and you just skim it like a shopping list,
The connection's just on the surface.
it's superficial. And that's the real danger of what you could call data gluttony. You know, this trend of speed reading, of consuming 100 books a year.
We all know someone who's proud of that. Is that actually a bad thing?
For self-transformation, often, yes. The ancient thinkers were very clear on this. Reading too much too fast is the easiest way to engage in thought laziness.
Thought laziness. I like that.
You're sacrificing your own thinking to serve someone else's. You're just filling up your short-term memory with data, but you're skipping the hard work. the processing.
So you become a really fast data buffer, not a deeper thinker.
The knowledge never gets integrated. It stays external. Transformation requires moving that into your deep memory, making it part of your own mental structure. And that's why the real value is in revisiting a small number of core texts.
Just 5 or 6.
5 or 6, maybe. And you go back to them again and again.
Why is going back to the same book better than reading a new one, mechanically speaking?
Because the first read, that creates the blueprint, the neural connection. Revisiting it is like strengthening the cement. And every time you return, you bring your new life experience with you, so the idea gets integrated in new ways. You're deepening the roots, not just hopping from stone to stone.
That clears up the difference between reading for information, like technical manuals,
Or you need volume.
and reading for transformation, which needs depth.
Exactly. One is data acquisition, the other is cognitive reconstruction.
Let's shift to narrative. How the stories we read when we're young literally build our worldview.
Well, narrative is the native language of the mind. It's how we process meaning. So early on, when you're exposed to complex stories, whether it's the classics or, say, specific Turkish narratives about honor, you're getting foundational scaffolding for your morals, for your emotions.
It's like running simulations for life without the real-world risk.
That's it, exactly. Literature is a safe simulator for complex human experience. It changes how you see the world because it refines your psychological prediction models. It lets you process loss or sacrifice before you actually have to face it.
Which is why so many great psychologists point their students to the Russian novelists, right? To Tolstoy or Dostoevsky.
Yes, before they even touch the clinical texts. Because those authors, they offer a subtlety, a profound understanding of the human soul that, frankly, no empirical study can capture.
They're master psychologists themselves.
They've built a kind of psychological technology. A powerful narrative changes your internal viewpoint. It refines your thinking, your feeling, and over time, your behavior. It's the ultimate internal map.
So let's face a more sobering modern reality. This observation that so many young adults can't even remember the last book they finished. What's the consequence of that kind of stagnation?
We have to be blunt here. Basic survival. Eating, drinking, seeking comfort. That's something we share with all animals. The uniquely human project is continuous self-development.
Through art, science, literature?
Through these higher pursuits. And if you abandon that project, what's left?
Just the base needs.
And that leads directly to existential distress. A failure to develop the mind means your worldview stays small, constrained, and those people, they can't expand their internal map, so they try to bend the complex, messy world to fit their limited desires.
Which causes friction for everyone.
Misery, often. They lack cognitive adaptability.
So the real difference between a reader and a non-reader is, it comes down to mental control.
Fundamentally, people who engage in these high-level pursuits, they drastically reduce their dependence on just material or bodily pleasure for their satisfaction. Their mind is largely under their own control.
They can generate their own meaning.
While the non-reader's mind is a reactive system, it's constantly dependent on an external signal, a notification, a screen to feel engaged. One is the pilot, the other is just a passenger.
That control links straight to imagination. And this brings us to that great frustration for every reader. Why are movie adaptations of books almost always a letdown?
This gets us to the idea of the ingellum, the mind image. When you read, your mind builds an abstract world. It's not a blurry picture. It's incredibly high resolution, uniquely personal, built from fragments of your own memories, your own neighborhood.
Yeah, when I read about a hero's house, I'm picturing a house on my street.
Of course, and that's why a concrete adaptation from a director is always a reduction. It forces a fixed external image onto your infinitely rich, personal, internal world. That feeling of disappointment is literally your mind rejecting the inferior model.
So that ability to build that internal world, that's a skill, a muscle.
It is a critical cognitive skill. And if you only consume ready-made options, films, games, that muscle will atrophy. And you need it for more than just reading. You need it for contemplation, for planning, for observation. It's use it or lose it.
It's what lets us imagine a better future, not just a character. Okay, so to bring this home, let's talk about the therapeutic power of all this.
When you pair reading with reflection, maybe by writing notes, it becomes a powerful form of psychological regulation. It helps you process intense emotion suffering, joy, by putting them into a structure. The text gives you the distance you need to analyze them.
I remember spending years, literally years, trying to understand a single complex diagram in a book on chaos theory. that sustained effort, that struggle. That's the mechanism, isn't it?
That is the core of transformation, that sustained effort, returning to the difficult thing again and again until it finally yields. That's what permanently alters your operating system.
Which brings us all the way back to intention.
The text is a mirror. This is probably the most important thing for you to understand. The book will give back to you exactly what you bring to it.
So if you're looking for wisdom,
If you approach it seeking to become an alim, a wise person, you will find wisdom. If you approach it just looking for a simple distraction, like a monkey, you'll see a limited, simple reflection. The book doesn't change, its reflection of your mind does.
which makes that classic question, the desert island question, kind of interesting.
The what 3 books would you take question.
Yeah.
You have to reject the premise. It misunderstands the whole point. If I were truly on that island, the transformation from my reading already done, my priority would be finding sustenance and a distinctly uncomfortable place to sit.
Not a book.
No, I would choose reflection. Deep, sustained observation of nature. That is the true act of learning. The books were just the training. They prepared my mind to engage directly with reality without needing a prompt.
Making the mind self-sufficient. A perfect place to end. Thank you for walking us through the mechanics of human cognition.
It was a pleasure, and I hope our listener picks up a challenging text this week and just practices the art of going back to it. Thank you.